Please hit the subscribe button below. New videos every week. Also follow me on Instagram at @thebasement with 3 underscores. Thanks. Bud.
It's the worst movie ever made.
I hope.
Cardinal right here with us, man. How are you, sir?
Good.
When you get the call.
How's your life, Zach?
Life is good. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really good. Glad to be here.
What's happening, man? Welcome back to Toronto.
Thank you.
And everybody's excited to see you. Congrats on Django.
Oh, thanks. Because it's kind of a shot in the dark.
Right.
But it's just...
Women are really treated...
How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. I'm good.
Welcome back to the basement, everyone. I'm your host, Nocturnal. And today we got a Canadian legend, man. A guy that I was spamming his Instagram live with comments. I was all over it. He's probably like, who is this psychopath? I was DMing him. And then eventually I think he gave in, and he's like, okay, who the hell is this Ben kid that just in my Instagram live and stuff? And he let me go on his Instagram live. We talked for a few minutes, and then he said and agreed to do a quick podcast with me. So I'm more than happy, more than pleasured. We got George Stroumboulopoulos here, man, the Canadian legend.
How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. I'm good.
Excellent.
How's your quarantine going?
You know what? I'm living 2 quarantines, right? There's the intellectual one where I worry about people who are suffering, and I try to see how I can be of service in that respect. And you know that this is very challenging, both physically for some people, but also emotionally for some people, and financially. So I take very seriously. But as for me in my home, it's fine. I've got food. I have a job. I'm not worried. So I'm in a very privileged position, and I recognize that.
Yeah.
But also, I have no problem staying locked in my home. Like, it's easy for me.
Is it kind of your comfort zone, your house?
Yeah, I mean, it is, but it's not even about comfort as much as that I'm basically Newton's law of physics, right? I'm one of them. I'm either an object in motion or an object at rest. So
Yeah.
If you tell me I can't leave my house, I'll find lots to do.
Yeah.
Totally fine with that. I don't crave, I don't need that outside thing right now, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, partly, I suppose it's because my life is very busy and very public, so I have lots of that. If this is a nice break.
Yeah, I'm just praying for everyone during this quarantine and throughout the pandemic and stuff, man, because a lot of us are, like you said, a lot more fortunate than others. So I want to touch on your early life, growing up first, man, if you don't mind. Where are you from? You're from Malton, Ontario, right?
Raised in Jane and Wilson, Rexdale, and then I moved to Malton, which is where the airport is.
Yeah.
And then I've been in essentially the Queen and Bathurst area for, I feel like 20 something years, maybe 20 plus years down at Queen and Bathurst in Toronto. But I'm a Toronto boy for sure.
And did you have any like hardcore musical influences when you were growing up?
My uncle was a huge influence on me. My uncle was the guy that listened to Gordon Lightfoot and Bob Dylan, John Prine, Tom Waits. So
All the fucking legends.
Neil Diamond. Like my uncle loved music, played guitar every day in the house, you know. So I was around whenever I was at my grandmother and my uncle's house. I was definitely influenced by him. But that was, you know, when I was really, like, my folks split up when I was 7, but when I was really, really young and my dad was there, I have very strong memories when I was 4. My dad listening to Hendrix, Clapton, The Doors, Janis, a lot of blues, you know, Albert King in the house. So I remember that, but I'm so lucky, man, that I'm of the age where I remember what was essentially the beginning of hip hop and essentially the beginning of punk rock and the beginning of the metal that I like. So I was in a very, very impressionable age when all of these genres essentially started. So, and in my neighborhood, you know, it was really ethnically diverse. So there's music from all over the world bumping all the time. So I was heavily influenced just by my environment.
Yeah, for me it was mainly top 40 hits because I was born in 96. So throughout the early 2000s, it was all majority top 40 and pop and all that stuff. And now hip hop's just a huge wave and kind of genre.
And I was in class in junior high when hip hop was really beginning the late 70s stuff had happened, but that early, when I'm 10, 11 years old into 12 years old, I remember my teachers were talking about how hip hop was a phase, rap was a phase, and it was just going to go.
Were you interested in it back then?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because Public Enemy, right? So Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys, Boogie Down Productions a bit later, were Grandmaster Flash, were huge in I grew up in a neighborhood that wasn't a white neighborhood. There were white people there, but it was very ethnic and very Jamaican, very Caribbean, really. And so a lot of the guys in my neighborhood, my stretch of the neighborhood, had cousins in New York or Philly. So cassettes would make their way up. So I would hear I remember, because I was listening to a lot of heavier music when I was, let's say, 8 or 9 years old. And I remember these guys coming to me saying, yo, listen to this, my neighbors. They're like, it's rap music. And I was like, all right, play it for me. Because I had heard The Message, and I had heard the Sugar Hill Gang, hip hop, hibbity hop. But at that time, a lot of it was very party based, very fun sounding. And when I was really young into music, I wasn't really that into fun music. I wanted like mean, hard stuff, right? So I remember them saying, check this out. And they played me this record, which I loved. And then I was like, oh my God, I recognize that sound. And then I would play them the Zeppelin record where they sampled it from. And that was the beginning. We were really young. So they were playing me the first Beastie Boys record. And that first Beastie Boys record became my, that and Public Enemy. And of course, Run DMC became this thing that they were the kings of rock to us. So it was really big. But like I said, I didn't love, like party hip hop was not my vibe when I was a kid. I was listening to punk and metal. So I wanted Public Enemy and Boogie Down Productions. Those were really huge for me. And then of course when De La hit, when I'm in my late teens, that's when I was really into De La and trying to call that.
Like you said, sampling's huge in terms of hip hop and stuff like that. Just other.
That's all it was, man. It was a sampled beat. But what was dope was that now we have access to the information. We know what's on each record. But a lot of times back then the samples weren't cleared, so you didn't know unless you knew the record. You didn't know. So I'd be like, I think that's an Al Green song, or I'd be like, dude, that's Zeppelin, or that's AC/DC, and then my neighbor's dad would be like, you're crazy, that's Parliament Funkadelic, and then so everybody would have to kind of crowdsource in the room what the record was, because we had these cassettes that were mixtapes and they were dubbed, so we didn't have all the information. We didn't know who the hell the artists were half the time. But again, it was really brand new at the time, really brand new.
Who because I know you're like a driven guy, right? You've been in broadcasting for how many years now?
2020 now. My first radio show that I think in college radio was 1991.
Okay, I was gonna ask you about that too. I was gonna go into college and all that stuff, but like I know I watched a video the other day about you talking about your mom and how she was working like 3 jobs just to kind of provide for you, right? Like, did she kind of distill that like ambitious like drive in you?
She did not put any ambition or drive into me, but I'll tell you, because I grew up in this home, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this who maybe grew up as immigrants, careers were not thought of. You didn't have careers. You didn't even have dreams. You had jobs. And so my mom delivered a newspaper in the morning. She had a paper route. Then in the afternoon, she worked at a greasy spoon restaurant where she worked making fries in the back of the kitchen, and then working for just dudes who were misogynist and rude. And so my mom had those 2 jobs, and then she started to work. She was a nurse at night. Okay. So she worked hard. So my mom instilled a work ethic in me, but my whole family did. My grandmother was forced to retire when she hit 65, and she was pissed because she wanted to keep working, right? So again, I didn't have an ambition or any of that stuff. I just had work ethic.
Yeah.
That's crucial. My mom never really cared what I did for a living. I don't think she does right now. It was always just about, if you're a good person and you work hard, then that's enough.
How did you find an interest in like broadcasting and radio broadcasting? I mean, did you always think you're going to get into that, or did you?
I loved radio, but no, I didn't, because I didn't think you could.
Right.
I didn't know how you would do that. Like, how would you?
Yeah. Like you said, like you didn't really have the information back then, right?
None. And, I would hear people on the radio tell stories about how they would just, walk in off the street, or they knew somebody who would give them a gig. And I was living in Malton at the time. I didn't know where any radio stations were. I knew Q107 was at Young and Bluer, but they weren't going to give me a job. And whenever I had called radio stations, I couldn't even get the program directors to call me back. So and why would they? I was just some punk, right?
Yeah.
And what happened was I was working as an usher at a movie theater in Rexdale, a place called
Cineplex? Silver City?
Yeah, no, it was Cineplex. It was Cineplex, yeah. Yep. And right beside my movie theater was a Humber College Adult Learning Center. I was still a teenager, but I wanted to go get my motorcycle license, and I knew you could take your motorcycle test in the parking lot of Humber College. So I went next door to pay the $213 it cost to get my motorcycle license back then to sign up. And the woman who signed me up gave me a Humber College course calendar because that's what, that's where the motorcycle thing was in. So I went home and I was flipping through it and I saw radio production or radio broadcasting. And I went, wow, screw it, I'll just do that. And that's how I applied. I had a 10-second meeting with the program coordinator, wasn't going to get in, and then suddenly I got a letter saying I was admitted. It was very strange.
Probably worked out better for you than working at the beer store or the Ford plant, eh?
Dad worked at the Ford plant. My grandfather worked at the Ford plant. That was their hope for me. My dad's side of the family assumed I was going to be at the Ford plant. My mother's side assumed I was going to go work, landscaping, or I thought maybe I could become an assistant manager at Cineplex or something like that. And that's what I thought.
Why the beer store? Free cases?
I never worked at a beer store. My friends did. So that was the key, right? My friends worked at the beer store, so they would each get a case a month. But what would happen is if a case fell off the forklift and 2 bottles shattered, then sometimes that case ended up in the trunk of their car. Right. So we had a lot of beer.
I'd be doing the same thing.
It happened. All of us took jobs. I worked at a Subway sandwich shop and a Mr. Submarine, so I could feed my friends. I worked at the movie theater to give them free movies. My friends got jobs. We all took jobs at different places where we could take care of each other in the community. It's like, one guy was one of those marketing research people at the malls. So whenever he got samples, he'd call us, come in, today's sample day. And we'd go in there, we'd eat for free or drink for free or whatever.
I remember I worked at McDonald's doing the same thing. I feel like it's your obligation when you work at a fast food restaurant, when you're in your teen years, you gotta feed the gang.
People, man, take care of your people, man. You have to take care of your people.
Humber College. Did you go there for radio broadcasting, right?
You know what? I liked it. I didn't really pay attention or take it very seriously for the first 6 months. I think it was kind of still a holdover from my high school days, right? I didn't really give a shit about school. I formalized in ever part of my life. I was never going to go to university. Didn't care about it. But I got there. It was across the street from the movie theater that I worked at. It was not too far, a motorcycle ride from my mom's home where I was living. And it was nice. It was very practical. That's what I liked about Humber. Pardon me. It was very practical. And you had a radio class, you had an announce class. The teachers, a lot of them I'd listen to on the radio. So, but I found, out at that stage of my life, what was I, 18, that you don't always get out what you put in, but you certainly don't get anything if you don't put anything in. Right. Yeah. So I was very realistic as a young person, and I'm very realistic now, which is life's not fair and doesn't always work out the way you want, and fucking big deal. But it occurred to me then, if I tried, I might be okay. So I started to try. I started to read the books, and I started to practice, and here we are, almost 30 years later.
What flipped that switch? Was it like a moment that you kind of, or you just said, no, fuck it, I'm just gonna try and give it my all here?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've been thinking about that, and I remember one day saying, I should probably read the books.
Yeah.
But there wasn't like a thing that triggered it. It was just deep in my head that I should maybe apply myself. Like I said, I don't come from a lineage of students, right? I come from a lineage of workers. So, and I was grateful for that, the working thing. But I remember it was somewhere around the winter of my first year. So I guess I'd been in school for 3, 4, 5 months. So I don't know how long it was. Where I just thought, I'm probably just going to read it. I'm going to read the book and I'm going to try. I don't know. It wasn't like a switch. Definitely a switch went off in my head, but nothing triggered it that I can recall.
First job coming out of Humber, was it with radio broadcasting?
When I was at Humber, this dude that I knew wanted to build a pirate radio station, and so he did. he found the schematics for a transistor and built one, a transmitter, right? Built the tower.
A little DIY.
Well, he built one. It was illegal, but built it anyway, and didn't have any money to pay anybody. And he had heard me on the radio in class because he was in school with me, and he said, "Do you want to come do this show?" And I said, "Sure." And that was it. It was in Rexdale in the Albion Mall. He took over a closet and set up this pirate radio station. And then from there, I did an internship out in Kelowna. I left Toronto, went to Kelowna, and I ended up hosting a metal show. And I was a station mascot, and I assisted whenever they needed photocopies and such in the music department. But I was essentially, that was the beginning of my career. And I came back to Toronto a few months later, got a job at the Fan when the sports station launched, the sports radio station, and I was a technical operator. Now, they didn't pay you any money, right, or very little. A lot of people got paid very little. So I still worked at the Subway, and I still pulled some shifts at the movie theater, and I drove a forklift on the weekend at the airport unloading cargo from airplane containers. So I did all that while I was still working, while I started my career in radio, and I volunteered at a college station as well.
Well, you figure something good would come out of all that grinding and stuff for sure.
You know, it's a simple thing. It's a simple thing, right? The grind. I'm not really about the hustle. I'm about the grind, right? Because the hustle is like, the hustle requires other people. You're out there, you're in. The grind is you.
Yeah.
It comes from within, and it's why now I don't like working with people who need to be motivated. You know, it's like, oh, you need bosses or whatever to help motivate you. No, fuck that, man. If you don't have motivation, you're not at my level. It's not better or worse. You're just not at my level, right? And I require people who have a built-in motivation. And so for me, that came from go to work, man. Like, you're an adult, go to work. And so the grind taught me an awful lot. So now I can work, like, I still have that work ethic, and I suspect it will never fade because I learned it like busting my ass just to, feed, get to eat, and you weren't going to be able to, I mean, I couldn't eat a sub every day.
I mean, Subway's pretty good, right? But do you think, you said that you don't really know what moment really kind of flipped the switch for you to get that drive and motivation. Do you think maybe what took you into radio and your interest in that was because you're so comfortable talking with people?
But I wasn't. That's the thing. I was very shy.
Okay, you were shy, eh?
As a kid. As I got into my later teens, you know what it is?
But did you have like a good way of connecting people, even if like we were off the camera and I just met you?
Yeah.
Like, did you have a good kind of way of like connecting with people, having a good solid conversation? Even without cameras on?
Oh no, yeah, for sure. In fact, I'm the same person on air that I am off air, and I think when MuchMusic hired me, that's what they saw. They saw that, and I didn't feel any different on camera. No, you know what it was? It was my love of music. That's it. Like, the thing is this: I know a lot about music, and I spent a lot of time immersed in music from when I was 5 years old, 4 years old to this day. Yeah. So for me, radio was an interesting way to talk about music and to share music. And so that was it. I had no intention of any career. I just thought I would do overnight shows, playing music for the radio, take the phone calls. I love doing it. It's one reason why, even as my career kind of grew and took on different directions, or took different directions, I maintained my radio show because that's what I love to do, is sharing records. So it wasn't that I was confident. I wasn't really confident. I was always a confident person, but I was more cocky than I was confident. Now I'm confident and less cocky, but back then I was just more cocky. And
comes with age.
Yeah, it totally comes with age, and it comes with experience, right? I mean, you look around and you look at the world, and go, who gives a fuck, man? Nothing really matters. Nothing bores me more than ego. And I was never really egotistical. That was never my thing. And I also had I was very lucky, based on, I think, my upbringing and my neighborhood, that I never ever once, and to this day, don't feel the need to prove myself to anybody. I wasn't looking for my mom's approval. Yeah. I wasn't looking for my teacher's approval. I'm not looking for my boss's approval. I want my bosses to like what I did so that they gave me more opportunity, but I didn't need that. I didn't have that fucking hole in my personality where people are like, I just want people to like me. I never had that. Right? I don't give a fuck. And I think that's from the punk stuff and the metal stuff that I listen to, right? And
that probably kind of helped you throughout your career too, of like kind of answering question or asking questions that some reporters probably feared, right? they didn't probably want to get into that zone with like a celebrity or artist or something like that.
You know, when you're interviewing somebody a lot, they have chances are been interviewed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like an animal. They can sniff out your intention.
Mm-hmm.
My intention was to make really good stuff, but it didn't mean that I had to get over on them, to use a wrestling phrase, right? I knew that if I approached an interview with genuine curiosity and I didn't have an agenda to make me look good,
Yeah.
then that's what happened. And you know, in my radio days, I started interviewing people, but because I'm so fucking comfortable in my own skin, I'm so chill, I was able to just be this guy when I met them and did the interview with them. And also, you can do yourself a disservice in the interview game if you try to hit 10 home runs in 10 questions. It's not how human being, if you had a friend who every time you got on a streetcar with them or a subway or whatever, or a bus or in the car, and everything you talked about was emotionally exhausting all the time, it would be fucking terrible. You're a bad friend, right? So you want someone who understands the range. Let's have some fun. Let's fuck around. Let's talk seriously. Let's go real. So that's what I do that in my regular life with my friends. And I just did that in interviews.
Right. Kind of know when to talk about what.
Read the room, right? Like A, read the room. B, have some empathy towards the person you're interviewing. C, take your job seriously, but don't take yourself seriously, right? And most people who chase fame in this game don't realize that if you do it the right way, and I mean the human way, right, you're gonna get all those perks anyway.
Yeah.
So just fuck.
So like finding like a passion and sticking to it regardless of kind of like the fame and stuff. You're not doing it for that reason alone. No,
but it's okay to want that stuff. Like it's okay because look, it's a much better life when you have a little bit of bread and you're comfortable with, like, I'm not saying it's a much better life. It's an easier life in some respects on a technical level, right? What I mean is you just like be a person, be a human being, because whether or not you succeed in this career, only like 30% of it's up to you. The rest of it is up to the fucking market, the era you're in, the bosses you've come across, the influences. All, like, there are myriad ways for your career to go off the rails that have nothing to do with you. When people say, you know, I'm a self-made person, I'm like, bullshit. Yeah. And if you are, it means you are oblivious to the people that gave you help, or worse yet, you took advantage of others, right? Mm-hmm. So there are so many things that contribute to whether or not you're successful that you ought not to act like it's all you, right? And I think if you can do that, you have a shot. And let's say your career doesn't blow up the way you want to. It, in fact, blows up the other way, and you don't have a career. Well, what you've done is all the right human things anyway to prepare yourself to handle change, to prepare yourself to handle disappointment, to prepare yourself to be open to other things. So I've always been a big believer in just do whatever you got to do that makes you a better person and more equipped for the life that you're living. That chances are will help you be a better broadcaster.
How did you get your job at MuchMusic as a VJ? Because that platform was huge when I was growing up, right? Early 2000s stuff, man. Like, that's where you got all the new music videos. You guys had like all the best guests.
It's killer.
Yeah, it was an amazing show. I think it was like channel 49 for MuchMusic, then like I think it was 48 for Much More Music for me.
Nice. Where are you?
Sorry?
Where are you?
Hamilton.
Hamilton, right? Yeah, Hamilton.
Yeah. Remember what I thought? I was like, do you know where Hamilton is, man? On the Instagram Live.
Of course I know where Hamilton is. I'm from Toronto. I was working at a radio station called The Edge at the time. It was a rock radio station, and I was hosting alternative rock, and I was hosting a show called Live in Toronto, where I was interviewing people.
Yeah.
So there was an opening on a show on MuchMusic called The New Music, and I had got a call from somebody in the record business who had heard that the New Music host was leaving and had recommended me to them. So I met with the MuchMusic people, but I didn't grow up watching MuchMusic. I didn't have cable. So I didn't, and it was my...
You didn't have cable, huh?
No, I didn't have cable, yeah. So my TV, my mom, every TV I had up until I bought my own when I was an adult, every TV I ever had was found in the garbage, and it was not every channel worked, but we only had 3 channels anyway. And my mother would leave the TV in her closet, and we were only allowed to watch 2 shows on a Friday night. Like, that was it. And I could watch the first period of Hockey Night in Canada. And so I didn't grow up watching a lot of television. I grew up reading, listening to music, and going outside, riding my bike, playing street hockey, getting into fights. That's my life as a kid. So when Much offered me the job, I was just like, I was doing live in Toronto on the Edge, and I loved it. And my understanding of Much at the time was it was very poppy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to play boy band videos, right? So it wasn't my thing. But they had said to me, no, we have the new music. Would you be interested in the new music? And I went, yes, because one of the channels I did have was a channel called City TV, which aired the new music. And that's how I learned about the Jesus and Mary Chain, and the Clash, and bands like that too. That was one of the big ways I learned about new bands. And it was a show that I really respected, and I knew it was a very respected show. So when they offered me the job as the host of the new music, then I was interested. And
Right.
and it was because I was doing interviews. I found out later, after they hired me, that there were some artists that were a little bit older and a little bit more difficult and a little bit more aggressive, right? And they didn't think they had somebody on staff, they told me this, who could fight. So they had a lot of really good interviewers.
I'm your man.
Yeah, they needed, if a musician was going to act like a dick,
Yeah.
and get physical, they didn't feel like this is, again, I'm sure they did have those people, but this is what they told me. This is after they hired me. They told me they were looking for somebody who could handle his own when shit went, sideways. Yeah. So, yeah. And I found that out later. But yes, I am that guy because I was 27 years old and I came from the real world where I was actually in fights. They didn't want me to punch anybody out by no means or get punched out.
But verbally, kind of, to set them straight.
Yeah, or yes, that's a big part of it. Or also, when shit goes weird, are you gonna cower? Or are you gonna stand up? So so that's what they told me after the fact.
Who were some of your favorite interviews on there?
U2, Metallica.
See, that's just a ridiculous. Like, man, those 2 bands are huge.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. I was so lucky, man. I was like, I'm talking about.
Did you ever kind of get anxious?
Never. No. I don't get anxious. No, I don't have that.
Never.
No. But I always was excited. I was excited. That's the thing, right? Because I never wanted to. And if I ever felt, I would sometimes feel an anxiousness to start a show, like an excitement.
You just want to get started. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you got a big show and you got stuff going on. But my everyday was like, honestly, it was, hey, listen, you 2 are coming today. You want to do a thing? Yeah, cool. Green Day tomorrow. Fucking Limp Bizkit, Metallica, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots. Hey, Chuck D. Public Enemy's coming. Sex Pistols, Joe Strummer from the Clash. This is my everyday. So
to you, it probably wasn't even work, eh? Like, you're probably just fucking loving it, man.
When I got the Hockey Night in Canada job, everybody said, wow, that must be the dream job of a lifetime. And every now and then I would say totally, but I didn't mean it. I loved Hockey Night in Canada, but that was somebody, I got to host the new music, dude. I got to be around the most interesting artists of all time.
All right, shit that you listened to growing up.
Yeah. The fucking day I met Joe Strummer from the Clash, holy shit. Or Lemmy from Motorhead, or Chuck D. Like, I was having it, and KRS-One. I remember walking through the streets of Harlem with KRS-One.
KRS, classic.
Yeah, we're talking about Sound of the Police as cops drove by in Harlem, walking up on the 100s, and it was, to me, I mean, what a Mary J. Blige, interviewing like these legends every day. But also, and this was really important to me, was I was able to interview new artists and help break new artists. And I was also, when they offered me the host of the new music, I said I would take it on only one condition, which I don't think they were expecting me to give them a condition, but I gave them a condition, which is you don't have anybody hosting your metal stuff. Well, I want to host Loud. Give me that show. So they said, cool. I took on Loud for no extra money because I wanted to promote metal and punk, and I was able to do that on that show.
Did you have any like you said before, like you were the guy that they kind of put on for, probably like also for how good you are at your job, but for kind of deflecting people that gave you kind of like shitty answers or kind of being a dick, like you said, right? Were there any like awkward moments on there like that, like examples? Because I also watched a. You weren't interviewing them personally, but you were interviewing them like with a press conference. It was Eminem and Dr. Dre, and
I got thrown out of that. I got thrown out of that.
You got thrown out of that one because
I was done. I got picked up and carried out by my back of my arm, seriously, by Dre's security.
I didn't even think it was bad. Because for context, if people haven't seen it, you basically asked a question about Eminem's daughter and how she's going to see her dad, like his career and legacy when she grows up, and then for Dr. Dre, Dr. Dre, it was about Suge Knight coming out of prison. So those are two valid, relevant, like questions during that time. Right?
So, but that's the problem with pop game, and that's hip hop is pop music now, right? They're not really designed for real talk. Pop music is not designed for real talk. Pop music is designed to sell soap, right? And so it's which is cool if you know what it is, but it's really not. It's not. I'll give you an example. Daniel Richler on the New Music is interviewing Lou Reed, right? Lou Reed is not having it. Daniel says, "You don't even really want to be here." Lou says, "No." And Daniel's like, "Well, fuck it. Interview's over." Yeah. Right? Like in the rock and roll game, that is par for the course. You are expected to answer questions. In pop music, you're not, you can dodge and you're protected by everybody a million times. I'm just not the kind of guy. Don't send your artists to me if you're looking for a saccharine interview. I'm not the guy, right? Dre, it wasn't that I asked Dre the question that was the problem. It was that I kept asking it. It was that
the persistence.
He wouldn't answer. You talk bullshit to me. I don't do backflips. I'm like, well, tell that to somebody else, but I'm not buying that. So I kept pressing. That's why I got removed. I understand it in hindsight. And then that helped me learn, how do I ask those questions, those difficult questions, and not get kicked out, keep the interview going. And that's the craft, right? That's the art to it.
You probably got some nice sound bites from things like that, eh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It also gave me notoriety because people said, oh, he's not bullshit. Yeah. Like they knew that I wasn't bullshit, that I was showing up to ask real questions like a journalist. Even though I understand that MuchMusic had a different definition of journalism, it's not investigative journalism. But we were there at the Summit of the Americas getting tear gassed in Quebec City, trying to cover the news, interviewing punk rock bands underneath the green zone when the cops were throwing tear gas at us, and shooting rubber bullets. So we were doing real stuff. Yeah. We were doing real stuff. And I think, the audience, I'll tell you, I've been so lucky to do this for a long time, and I've hosted much bigger stuff than MuchMusic. But the number one thing people bring up to me is MuchMusic. It's the number one thing because I think people now realize how important it was, and they miss it.
It was the main outlet for all the new music, especially for the kids growing up, for the youth.
Culture,
yeah.
We talked about real shit. If we were playing a video that had a lot of really hypersexual imagery, we would host a show about it to help explain sexuality to young girls, but also more importantly, to young boys. Yeah. Let them know why it's okay for this and what's not okay. And that shit's really, no one's doing that on TV now. And are you kidding? No chance. Yeah. MuchMusic could have been Vice, but they could have been Vice before Vice. But the problem was I won't get into it. We know exactly what happened at Much, but they really could have done something.
Then you got your own show, right? It was a good segue because you said that you did way bigger show. So George Stroumboulopoulos Tonight, right?
It was big, man.
I mean, how many? 10 years?
10 years.
And I'm just gonna read some names off. The Tragically Hip, Hillary Clinton, Spike Lee, Ricky Gervais, LeBron James, Dana White, Gordon Ramsay, Steve Wozniak, McConaughey, Oprah, Kermit the fucking Frog, right?
Kermit, eh?
I mean, man, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. I've forgotten half the people we've interviewed. Yeah, when you mention those names, it's like, oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
What was that experience like, having your own show? That has to be something on CBC.
That was pretty neat. That was pretty neat. I never expected it. I was a big David Letterman fan and Tom Snyder fan, so I wanted to do a late night talk show, but it was such a grind every day to put a show together for 10 years that you just think about getting the show to air. That's what it is. So I certainly enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
How much work is involved? What's the process like before it even airs?
Oh my God, dude, 8 o'clock in the morning till hours after the show. I felt like I was working when we were in season, maybe 16, 17, 18 hours a day on that show.
Holy,
It was crazy, man. But I liked it. I would have had it no other way.
Starstruck when you're interviewing these people or no?
No, but I do remember the first time I met Eugene Levy. I was a little bit like wow.
Yeah.
It's Eugene Levy. Eugene Levy, Joe Strummer. Joe Strummer, I was super, like, obviously aware of how important it was to me because the Clash were monumental to me.
Yeah.
But Eugene Levy, growing up watching SCTV the way I did, that was quite a thing. Who else? I mean,
like you said.
you know what? It's just neat things. You know, I got to interview. I did a whole episode of our show. We're the only talk show that ever did this, where every single person on the show that night was connected to The Wire. So the first time I met Omar and Stringer Bell, I was really into that. I was like, this is the best thing ever.
Curious about this, just not even with like that show, just shows in general. What's it like recording in front of a live studio audience?
It can be very unnerving for certain people, right? It's not for me. I didn't really mind. I didn't want to do the show in front of an audience. I think doing a show in front of an audience means you have to make a different kind of show. And I think that you have, because a lot of it's designed about the entertainment of the audience. If you'll notice, I don't know if you probably wouldn't have, but there's a fundamental difference with the way I did the show versus the way most people who do shows in front of an audience do in the late night talk format. Most of the people who are hosts look at the camera 20 to 30% of the time. They look at the audience, right? Like that, 70% of the time. I did the opposite. I spent most of my time looking directly at the camera. I was talking to the person at home, and then in the commercial breaks or after the show, that's when I would really engage with the people in the room. Right. Having an audience is a real it's a curse and a blessing, because you can just do very different kinds of shows. And I was aware of the benefits of having a studio audience, but I knew that it would affect the show in a way that I didn't love necessarily.
So what do you guys talk about off the air? Like during a commercial break?
With the guest?
Yeah, with the guest, yeah. Well, because I'm always curious about that, because like whenever you, like you said, watch the Tonight Show or whatever. Okay, well, we'll be back in after this break or whatever, right? Then it just cuts to them just like chattering and stuff. Like, well, did you have any epic small talk conversation during the commercial breaks?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Because what would happen is the first segment of the show, of the interview, you'd be talking about stuff. Then you'd say, hold on, we'll be right back, and sort of commercial. Yeah. And then the control room would play music in the studio. And so I would just look at it and say, hey man, thanks for that. Or, hey, no, thanks for this. Let's talk. And she or they or him will say, yeah, man, this was crazy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, hold, say that. And then we come back. But sometimes it would be even wilder. I remember telling one guest during the middle of an interview in the commercial break that she should quit her tour and go home, right? I said, you're drinking too much, you're partying too much, and I'm not going to be one of these people in the media who just fucking is along for the ride. Yeah. I'm telling you right now, you need to go home. Hey, we're back. And then you go back and you finish the segment, and I saw her a couple of weeks later in LA, and she told me she went home. She quit her tour, and people were mad at me in her camp for it, but I don't give a shit. It was the thing to do, right? So there was always something like that happening. But those commercial break times were an opportunity to continue the making the guest feel comfortable enough to share with you.
Studio audience, what do you prefer? Do you prefer like a secluded area when you're interviewing someone? Or like the House of Strombo, right? Your YouTube channel.
Yeah, you get better interviews when it's just...
You're doing it at your house, right? Instead of in front of a live studio audience. Probably makes the guest feel way more comfortable. You're probably more comfortable.
And also, you know what it is that in front of an audience, the guest feels the need to perform. And a lot of times that means make them laugh, get a reaction, right? Because it's a very feedback-based career. Where when they come to my house, it's just me and them. It's not as hard to get them to open up because they're not performing. And that's the difference for me, is that I wasn't looking for artists to perform. I was looking for artists to be real. And that I prefer to do that not in front of a studio audience. But sometimes it's helped because the guest feeds off the energy of the audience and they want to put on a good show.
It depends on the person, I guess, right?
Yeah, all the time. It always does. And it depends on how tired they are that day, what their mood is.
The other shit that they got to do, right?
Yeah. Sometimes they were so nervous in front of a crowd.
You ever got to calm them down and say, all right, it's gonna be fine.
In the fucking hallway while the show is on in a commercial break, trying to talk again.
Really, eh?
Oh, dude. you know,
Well, I shouldn't say really, because like, who am I to say that? Like, I've never been in an audience with fucking how many.
I just wouldn't know that. You know, like I'd be like, hey, well, good to see you. I'm coming right back. I'll come right back in a commercial break, and I'd be out there looking at really famous people going, what's the problem? I'm feeling, what do you want? I need a drink. You want a drink? Do you have a problem? No. But you want a drink? Go get them a drink. So we started putting booze in the green room because people needed it to take the edge off. But there were times where the producer would call me and say, hey, come in the studio and whisper in my ear in front of everybody so they wouldn't hear. The guest doesn't want you to talk about this. And I'd be like, well, I'm not gonna accept that.
I was gonna ask you that too. Did that ever happen to you? And
it would happen, but I wouldn't accept it. Right? I would just say no. And then I would go out and I'd say to the guy, what's the problem? He's like, well, I don't want to talk about this. I said, look, here's why it's important. He's like, nobody cares when everybody cares. I always say the same thing. Trust me. I'm not here to sandbag you. I'm here to this conversation isn't going to be all easy fun, but it's going to be meaningful. And that's what we're here to do. But that would happen outside the doors of the audience. And then I would come right back in smiling, hey, welcome back. And then the person would come in. So that definitely did happen.
House of Strombo, you guys been doing that for how many years now? 5? The YouTube channel and stuff?
It's 5 years, yeah.
Is that like in collaboration with another like major broadcaster? Is that kind of, because like it's in your house, right? And then I'm watching it and it's good camera quality, good production, but it's still like it has a DIY feel.
Yeah, that was very important to me to keep that punk rock. So the radio show I partner with CBC on, right? So the audio from House of Strombo goes on CBC Music.
Okay. And I also seen Apple Music.
Well, so we did some of the big concerts. We partnered with Apple. Okay. And so we did it with them. Yeah, for sure.
Though some of the guests on there too. Let me read some names. I mean, that was crazy too, man. I watch those all the time. City and Color. You've had Gene Simmons on there. Jessie Reyes, who she's blowing up right now.
We had it before she blew up. Yeah.
You had her first. There you go. Sting. My mom loves Sting, man.
And that was such a crazy conversation.
She's a huge Sting fan, bro.
Dude, did you see when Sting and I it started to get really emotional in that interview? Like we started talking about his dad, and wow, but when his dad was passing, it was really emotional. And
how do you feel when that happens? Like when you're kind of cross that border with someone that you don't really have that great of a relationship with or whatever? Like how do you kind of keep it on track and keep it smooth for listening?
It's really challenging. You know, it's because I'm only interested in being a good human being first, so I don't ever want to exploit the person, but at the same time I want a real talk. So definitely I've had moments where like, I don't know how this is going to go. It's you know what, it's a minefield. Well, interviewing people about real things is like walking through it's the non-life threatening version of walking through a minefield. And it's but there's carnage sometimes. So I'm very conscientious about how I approach that.
How was Charlemagne the God?
It was great.
Because I'm a big fan of him. I watch Breakfast Club all the time, man, since I'm a huge hip hop fan. Like, so he's a great radio personality too. He's kind of like you. He says it how it is, straight up.
And he does it in the context of hip hop, right? Which is like just throwing bombs at people all day long. Yeah. Charlemagne. I'm a fan of Charlemagne as a broadcaster. I don't agree with I think 50% of Charlemagne's worldview, but and how he treats. That's not my. But it doesn't matter that I don't agree. Who cares, right? But I did like talking to Charlotte. I love the Breakfast Club. So I watch Breakfast Club interviews all the time. Great, and so it was just really nice that he was around at the time.
What's it like having like some of your favorite bands perform in your, like, not even 5 feet in front of you, but 5 feet in front of like the couch you watch fucking TV on? Like, that's gotta be nuts, man.
Crazy.
What's that like?
It's really neat. It's funny because this goes back to my beginning of MuchMusic and what I was saying to you about how there's no two versions of me. I'm this guy. Yeah. So, I remember walking out one morning. I was sweeping the front of the house, just getting it ready. And I knew I had an interview and performance in the house. And I'm standing there, and there's a tour bus parked across the street in front of my house. And I know that the band's sleeping there. And all of a sudden, I see Scott Whalen get up and walk up. And he's like, "Hey, man, can I use your bathroom?" I'm like, "Yeah, totally, bro." And so it's very just normal. But I know that it's not normal, right? The day the Cults played in here was epic for me. John Prine. I remember one winter morning I was in South Dakota at Standing Rock, and I got a call saying this guy is going to come and do an interview at your house. And my friend and I left South Dakota and drove all night. And I showed up to my house
Back to the crib.
10 o'clock in the morning, exhausted,
Yeah.
right? And we were in the dead of winter. We were out there sleeping in a tent, freezing cold. And I go home, and I come inside. I brush my teeth. I wash my face. I didn't even have time to change because I walked right downstairs. The Uber pulls up, and out comes James Hetfield from Metallica. And I'm a big I was a Metallica fan.
I see on your Instagram live, man. I'm Metallica's.
I love Metallica, right?
Yeah.
And when Hetfield came in the house, I just thought, fucking A, man. Fucking Hetfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really fun, and I never take it for granted. I can be very professional about it in that we have a show to do. Let's get everybody in order, but I'm very casual. So let's just have a good time.
Who's in that audience? Is it just like a group chat? You got like, yo, I got Metallica playing at the house, or I got Billy Talent at the house. Come over, guys.
Yeah, know what it is? It's we would put it out. I remember one day I woke up in Montreal and I got a text saying, hey, so Jimmy Eat World's wants to come play your house today. And I went, dope. And Jimmy Eat World was really big, so I just did an Instagram story on the plane. I went, yo, I'm flying back to Toronto because Jimmy Eat World's going to play at my house. If you want to come, email me. And I just put it out there, and people emailed me. And I went through the names to make sure it wasn't somebody who was a stalker or something. And then Jimmy Eat World comes in and plays. And then, but sometimes, it's like, if I know somebody I've met who's a really big fan of a certain band, I'll just personally text them and say, yo, you need to come over today at 3. And then they're like, oh, I'm working. I'm like, trust me, leave the job. And then, yeah.
That's insane that you got, like, that's amazing, man. Damn.
You know what it is? It goes back to the MuchMusic thing, man, which was if you don't let people, not everybody I interviewed had an audience, but it was really important when I worked at The Edge and at MuchMusic that both of those were done from storefront studios and people could come and be close, because I know how much it inspires youngsters to get out there and do their own thing. But now that Much doesn't do it and The Edge doesn't really do it, nobody really does it anymore. I said, fuck it, I'm going to do it in my house. So I want people, if I invite someone to come see, Dinosaur Jr., Power Trip, Jesse Reyes, Lights, A Tribe Called Red, all these artists who played my house, Billy Talent, Alexis on Fire. I know that people are going to bring their family, and I want these kids to be, 6 inches away from a powerhouse of a guitarist or a player, and that's
Even their role models. Even their fucking role models, they could be, right?
They're supposed to be, right? Not role models in the sense that they got to teach the kids good habits. No, role models in the sense that they got to teach the kids that you can go fucking do this. Yeah. And that to me is really meaningful, and that's why I wanted to do shit out of my house, because I thought, if I put my neck out, I got skin in the game now. Then the artist comes to my house and they know they have to step up.
So what's it like? You're still working in radio for CBC, right? What's it like? Do you kind of control like the music that's being played during that time? How much control do you have over the show?
I mean, I pick every song. The station doesn't know what I'm playing until it goes to air. You
got that credibility.
Well, when they offered me the show a long time ago, I said no, because I said to them, I don't like what you guys play. That's what I said. This is like years ago in the old CBC music. They said, no, we want to change it. I went, no. You don't really want what I do. You don't want what I do. And they said, no, you come over, you pick all the music. And I went, okay, if that's the deal, then I'll do that. Right. So I'm grandfathered in, right? I picked the records. Yeah. And yeah, the Strombo show is so wild. What a weird experience it is. If you love music, you like our show. But I'm running from country to satanic metal to jazz I play all kinds of shit. And I know that I know that everything I play isn't for everybody, but it doesn't matter. It's like, we're going to do this show. Let's all have a good time.
Who is your celebrity crush, and did you ever have a chance to interview them? That was a question I was wondering. Was there any celebrity or anything where you got to interview them, and then you're back in the day, you're like, holy shit, she's hot or whatever?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But you always had to be so pro that you never let on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What's weirder is when you interview somebody that you used to date. That's weirder. So somebody that you used to share your life with you is now sitting across from you in these red chairs, and you're having this fucking conversation. Then the commercial break. I remember this woman said to me, I interviewed her, and she looked at me in the commercial break, and she said, this is weird. I was like, it sure is. Anyway, we're back. So that kind of stuff I always enjoyed. I like the story that people don't know. I like that there's this other there's this subtext to the conversation that people are seeing on air. But sure, yeah, you grow up consuming, media, listening to music, and then there you are interviewing somebody who you were really into and are. It's a thing.
Did you ever have any regrets during your career of like not doing a particular interview or not taking a position or something like that?
I did. I turned down a job once that I should have taken. I didn't take it for good reasons, but in hindsight, I should have taken it. One of the reasons I didn't take it was I didn't like the team. Not that they were bad. I just didn't think the team was a good fit. Years later, I ended up working with them again in a different show, and it didn't fit. And I was so glad when that show ended, and that's a really big thing, right? You got to look at but in hindsight, I should have taken the show for sure. I think I could have done something really interesting with it. But I was offered an anchor job for Olympics coverage, and I turned it down. Who the fuck does that? Who turns that down? But I did. There were two reasons. Number one, it was happening in China, and I was doing all these stories on my.
What year was this?
The Beijing Olympics, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So 2008.
Is that when it was? I was doing all these stories about China's human rights record, and I didn't want to participate.
Okay.
I thought that so I turned down the Olympics. That was the main reason. I was like, it was the Chinese human rights record at the time, big part of our conversation. And then secondarily was the team. And like I said, I ended up working with them later and was like, no. I'm talking about the higher ups. The team itself, the crew would have been great. And I worked with a lot of them on my show. I should have done that job.
Like a event or party that you went to that you're like absolutely kind of like starstruck. There's so many celebrities there because like, you've interviewed a lot of celebrities, right? You got a bunch of credibility. Were there any like crazy house parties or anything like that? Like
I had a house party a couple of years ago where
are you a consistent house party host? Do you have a lot now?
No, I have a lot of people over for concerts, but I want them out afterwards. I once threw a party, not at my home, at another location. I once threw a party, and it was during TIFF, and it was packed with celebrities, right? Well, that's fine. But also, my friends were there, too. That's what made it.
That's amazing.
And my sister was there. But there was a moment where I'm standing there, and there's a bunch of people around us, but it's me, it's Bono, and it's Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, and we're just talking. And somebody tapped me on the shoulder and just went, "What the fuck?" And I just went, "I know, right?" It was one of those kind of events where that's a moment.
What was the moment where you realized that like, holy shit, like now I'm swimming with the big sharks. I'm interviewing the big people.
Oh, I never felt that way, but you know, in retrospect, and maybe this is part of the reason why I've been able to last as long as I have, is I'm just a technician going to the job site, right? So I have to do a thing, and I'm doing a thing, and I like to do a thing. I want to do this interview, and I don't get caught up in all that other stuff. I don't get caught up in it at all. After the fact, I look back and think, wow, I remember doing a tour across Canada with Oprah, and I'm standing on stage in front of 16,000 people with Oprah, and I'm looking around thinking, this is normal for me. This is easy. Afterwards, people reacted in a way, and I went, oh yeah, I guess this is a big deal, right? So I don't have that chip in my brain that gets worked up over it. But I also do have the chip in my brain that allows me to really enjoy it and really appreciate it. And I think that's really crucial, is that I enjoy what I do and I appreciate the opportunities.
I know you said that you don't get nervous or anything for interviews, but was there a point where have you ever gotten like drunk or high before an interview or
No, I've been straight edge for 25 years, right? So I haven't done anything, right? You know, I was really fucking hammered one night on an off night.
Yeah.
And my boss called me and said, I need you to come in and do a talk show.
Something like that.
And I did. And I was drinking a lot of coffee, trying to sober up, trying not to sound drunk on the air.
did you kill it?
I don't know, man. I'm sure it was terrible. But I'm sure it was terrible. But that happened early in my career. Like when I wasn't supposed to be working, right? But I actually, that's one of the reasons why I went straight edge. There were myriad reasons why I went straight edge, but one of them was, no. This job is serious. I'm taking this seriously.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be. Also, you go to parties and invariably people get sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, nah, man, I'm fucking here to win. I'm not here to be sloppy.
Yeah.
So I never wanted to be a part of that stoner culture, alcohol culture. And I also understood that there were a lot of people at home who had addiction issues. And I'm like, why would I why would I remind them of an enormous demon in their life? Why don't I just take this fucking seriously and be a grown-up? So that's what I did.
Was there ever an interview that you were most proud of, or not like the most famous person, but someone that you were like the most proud of, like, holy shit, like?
I got to interview a woman a couple of days before she passed away, and her name was June Callwood, and she knew she was dying. She was terminal. I don't know exactly how many days it was before, but she wanted to do one last interview. And so it wasn't that I was proud of the interview at all. I was grateful for the opportunity, but I went and sat down and had almost a 90-minute conversation, a real human conversation with somebody who was facing the end of life. That was meaningful. That was like real meaningful conversation, and I've always been grateful for that.
Like you said, you touched on before about being like kind of like sometimes like people are dicks that are being interviewed. Was there ever a point where you like you said, you mentioned it before, you just stopped it? You're like, fuck this, I'm not doing this no more?
Oh, I remember looking over at a guy once I was interviewing him, and I said, I don't think you're trying to be a dick, but you're being a dick. And he looked at me and says, I don't mean to. It's just that I said, I don't have time for that, man.
Yeah.
I was like, are we going to do this or not? Right. So I've had those moments. I remember being before an interview interviewing somebody who was an unbelievable diva. And I finally looked at him and I said, yo, we don't have to do this. He's like, but you came all this way for this conversation. I said, I came all this way for a meaningful conversation where we talked about real things. But if you want to act like this, I'm just as happy to go out and get fries in New York. I was in New York. I'm like, I'm just as happy to go and get fucking fries or a chestnut, you know?
Do they smarten up, or do they just say, fuck that, I'm gone?
He was not, I was older and more experienced in my career. He was much older than I am. He's one of the legends. And he fucking sucked it up and did it. But yeah, sometimes they don't want to have it. And they're like, I don't want to do it. I'm like, cool, whatever. Nobody, I don't give a shit. Like, I'm happy to do the conversation, but almost nobody moves the needle. You know, there's like Bieber and maybe Drake in terms of music that moves the needle. Maybe Lady Gaga a little bit, but not to sell records. So it's if this person doesn't want to be here, then why am I going to waste my time? Yeah. And ultimately, if I'm wasting my time, we're wasting the audience's time. I'm not interested in that.
What are 3 things that you would tell your younger self, your 23-year-old self, just getting started up? Is there anything that you would tell that person, or would you just keep it how it is? You learn from your mistakes and you keep it pushing. Yeah,
that's it. I keep it exactly how it is. But I would tell myself, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Don't sweat the small stuff. Everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. You know, when I was young and hungry, you just go. I would have actually told myself, number one thing I would have done is be healthier. You know, because I mean, this job destroyed me. You know, you work in shift work, overnights and that, eating shit, like all that stuff. You know, I would have told myself to develop healthy habits. That's the number one thing I would have said. If you're going to do this, develop healthy habits and learn how to sleep. I didn't do that stuff, right? And I'm paying for it now. Also, maybe get physio after your motorcycle accidents, you know, which I didn't do either, and I'm paying for it now. But no, otherwise, I feel like my career has gone the way it needed to go. You know, and I needed the wins and I needed the losses to happen when they did, to help build, you know, to help build the foundation that I have today.
Listen, man, I want to thank you for coming on here, cause like I said, I'm just a kid from your fucking Instagram live chat that's spamming you and stuff, and you didn't have to do this, right? Whatsoever.
I want you to be good at this, and I want you to succeed. And then I want you, when you are good at this and when you succeed, I want you to make sure that you treat everybody who comes up after you with grace, right? And that's the thing. Like, this business is better when we're all good and we all win and we're all together. So I'm happy to do it. I can't do all of them all the time, but I do as many as I can. I'd much rather talk to you than talk to, you know, a traditional news outlet, because it's different, right? Those are boring. Human conversation. I like this. And my job is to support you, just like your job is to support somebody else.